welcome back to another episode of Sai's Eyes, where I'm continuing to take a look at SaiOS, my life operating system. So last episode we concluded the alignment zone with the habits and practices, so if you haven't taken a listen to that, highly recommend doing so. This episode we'll be starting and going into my vaults. And so the vault system here, so this is heavily influenced and heavily built upon August Bradley's Pillars, Pipelines, and Vaults framework. And so I kind of modified it a little bit, but essentially it's built off of that. And so he has something called a actually forgot what, I think it was his vaults or something like that, where he had all his different types of information and knowledge that he's accrued, databases filled with different text, as well as notes, as well as links and resources, as well as broken down by topics, etc. And so what I've essentially done, I don't want to go into what he's created necessarily, because he has a lot of great videos on YouTube outlining that. But I want to talk about how I've implemented some version of that for myself. And so essentially what I have is something called the Wiz Dome. So you might have heard it in one of the overview episodes, but it's I just wanted something that, so the vaults it's architectural things, like having the vaults and domes are very there's some ducks flying, but vaults and domes are very inextricably linked, and so I just wanted something with the wisdom dome, and I was like, all right, let me just name it Wiz Dome. So everything that I have within the different vaults, the different knowledge categories and sections and subsections, etc., they're broken down in this dashboard called the Wiz Dome. So throughout these episodes, so this is similar to the alignment zone, where it's a dashboard with links out to each of the different databases. And so within this Wiz Dome, I'm going to first go into my book vault. So this book vault, hopefully you've seen on my website, but I have a public-facing version of it on my website, which you can see, and it's on Notions. But you don't need a Notion account to necessarily view it. Though Notion is free, so I recommend using it. But you can still view it without having a Notion account. And so within this book vault, so I kept track of books that I wanted to read and had been reading, and notes on Google Docs, right? So I had a bunch of, Google Docs and Evernote. So I had a bunch of books that I wanted to read, which is on Evernote, and then book notes on Google Docs. I'm like, this is not great. So once I found about Notion and his system, I was like, this is perfect. And so within this book vault database, I'm going to go through each of the fields here. So obviously there's the title of the book. I have a field for subtitle, field for creator, so just the author or authors. Then I have a place for a cover, and so you can link an image or a URL or anything like that as the cover here, and so you can actually have a view of it. One of the views is a gallery view in Notion, and so you can see the covers of the books if you filter by that field of cover. And so that's one of the views. Hopefully you've noticed on the public-facing version of my book vault, you can see that the books that I've read, one of those views is by the cover, is by the gallery view. So you can see the cover of those books. And then I have a status field, which is just, so the values are reading, paused, next read, to read, might read, and finished. And so reading, obviously pretty self-explanatory there. So right now, I'm reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I have a paused field, but right now none of my books are paused since I'm actively reading. This is the only book that I'm reading, and I'm actively reading it. So no books are paused, but in case I had a book that I paused and wanted to get back to at some point, but just wanted to get to something else first, this might be an allocation, a field there. And then next read is basically the first priorities of, the top priority of one that I want to read next. Like, next read is, something I may already have the book for, and I want to read it next. I already know. I don't have anything categorized as such right now, but, there are some books. There's 10, 15 books in my bookcase that I want to be reading. So I'll just have the option, as I'm finishing up the current book, I'll just be kind of feeling like, all right, might be a good time to start reading this. So there's no science to it necessarily. It's all art in terms of what book I want to read next. But I have a lot of options where I can go and choose from. So that's, the freedom within the structure that I've created. Then there's a to-read, which are books. A lot of my books actually in the book vault are in a to-read stage, where these are books. This is my default stage where if I want to just capture the book real quick, instead of previously having an entry in Evernote of my book list, the ever-expanding book list, I just come here, I enter it, and it's like, oh, this is a nice quick book, or, this is a nice book, let me capture real quick and categorize it as to read. And then from there, I can comb through these different books when I'm looking for books to buy and make that purchase. And then might read is similar to that, but these are books that, are linked in different other books as well as podcasts, or been referenced somewhere, and it's like, oh, this might be cool to read one day, but it's not a must, or even would I spend the money for it? Maybe, but it's just a note down somewhere, so I'm keeping track of it somehow. So some of the good amount of books are also categorized as this. And then finally finished, so makes sense. So those are the 6 categories of status within my book vault. And then I have priority, which is there in August's section, but I don't really use this much. I categorize every book as first, second, third, fourth, or fifth priority, but it doesn't really mean much to me right now. So it may in the future, but I just have it as a placeholder field. And then I have a format. And so if it's print, audio, or PDF, so those are the only formats of the books that I've read or would read that I have so far. I don't know if there's any other versions, but those are the 3. Then I have a TBD, which I list as any books that that I don't currently have in my possession within those 3 previous formats. And it's essentially TBD. Like, I could buy the audiobook, I could buy the printed version, I could buy the PDF or something else. And then I have tags. So these tags are basically different categories with about which the book discusses. And so I'll get to this within the knowledge vault that I have, or the wisdom vault, I should say. But these are essentially just categories that the book talks about. And so let me just read the list of categories that I have. It's an ever-expanding one, and I have a tough time of, sometimes do I consolidate them? How do I categorize them? How do I make sure that they're not overlapping, or is there another category that I need to add? It's just stuff like that. But let me just read through these different tags, and you'll get a sense for what I'm thinking about. So there's autobiography, body, business, creativity, design, communication, diet and nutrition, economic, education, fantasy football, fashion, feedback, fiction, financial, health, historical fiction, history, leadership, LGBTQ, life hacks, marketing, mind, music, parenting, personality, planning, productivity, psychology, relationships, religion, science, self-help, side hustle, social justice, social media, society, spiritual success, sustainability, technology, volunteering, and writing. So that's the list I have right now. And by reading more books, I imagine that the list will only grow. And so, a lot of books have a lot of tags in them. So this is a multi-select field. So right now for meditations, I have selected, autobiography. I don't know if it's technically an autobiography, but it is his work. So I just tagged it as such. And then spiritual, mind, and leadership. So I'm sure there's more tags in here that I've not tagged it for this book for meditations, but those are the 4 tags that I have right now for this book. Then I have a start date and a completed date just to track how long I've taken to complete the book. Then I have a value field, which is 1 through 5 stars. This is after I've completed the book, what is the value that I think it's going to have, or what value has it already given me as I was going through the book. And so there's about 3 5-star books that I have that I've read so far, a good amount of 4 stars, and I think most of the rest of them are 3. I don't think there's been a 2-star one, but maybe mistaken. I then have a URL, I think August has it, so I just kept it in, but it's not too useful necessarily, unless if for the public vault, if someone wants to go to Amazon and buy it, they can just click on that. And then I have just metadata about when this value was edited and created, so nothing special there. And then I have 3 relations here. 1 to projects. So if there's any projects that relate to what I'm working on in regards to these books, so maybe this meditations thing has inspired me to, this meditations book has inspired me to do something in terms of a project, I can link back to it whenever I want and read the notes that I had within it. And then I have a thought vault relation, which I'll be getting into as well, but if there's any thoughts that I have, any notes or ideas that I've listed out that may not be within the book notes itself, then I'll relate it out to this. And then in my wisdom vault, which is just essentially all the categories that I listed off in the tags field, those are all values with which I fill up information from, and they can be related to books, they can be related to podcasts, etc. But that's a wisdom vault, so we'll get into that. But this book vault is related to that wisdom vault. So those are all the fields, and then within the template, I just have a notes, or I guess I have a table of contents, which just makes it easier to track it. So if chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, etc., I don't have to necessarily fill those out, or I do have to fill those out, but the table of contents, when you label the headers as a heading 1, heading 2, header 3, they'll fill up the table of contents and be indented accordingly. And then it's this, obviously with Notion, it's a page as well. This entry within this book vault database of with this meditations entry is also a page, which means in addition to all the fields that I went through, you can actually write notes in them. And so all the notes that I have within this book vault page, I can just fill in, based off of chapter, based off of the section, etc. And so I'll just take a second. So that's pretty much the book vault there. I'll just take a second to so the type of note-taking he employs that I've kind of adopted myself is hierarchical highlighting, where there's a lot of different colors on Notion that you can have text as. There's about 8 to 10. And so everything is in the default white text color. I have a dark mode, so black, gray background with a white text is the default for everything. But let's say if something is of value, as I'm taking these notes, there may be a lot of notes that I'm scrolling through. How do I know which ones are the most value that I want to return to, that I want to see when I see these notes, right? And so when I'm doing this highlighting, I'll usually do it, sometimes I'll do it while I'm reading the book itself, sometimes I'll do it after I've read the book in full. But either way, I have a 3-level, hence the hierarchy, 3-level highlighting of yellow, orange, and red, where yellow is the least important, but it's still more important than the normal white text. But if there's something that you want to bring your attention to, just passing by, then I'll highlight it yellow. Then orange is something a little bit more important, something more profound, let's say, something that I want to read the entire, that note of, that entire bullet. And then finally you have red, this is one of the key takeaways from the book. Like, every time you think of the book, you have to think of this, this thought appears in your mind. This is one of the vital things that you've learned from and are acting on from the book. And so, that is the yellow, orange, red hierarchical highlighting system that I use within my book vault as well as my other vaults that I take notes in. And so with that, that concludes the book vault episode. In future episodes, I'll be continuing to take a look at the different vaults and the other databases within my Wiz Dome. So let me know, give me some feedback if this was helpful. Maybe you do something similar, maybe a Notion in another place. Let me know. I'm all ears when it comes to something like this. So let me know if this is useful, and we'll go from there. But thank you for listening to another episode of SaiOS. I'll see you when I see you.